You disgrace! Take your rags and leave!
You know nothing.
How dare you get out!
Mother, please, let's talk.
This is embarrassing. Your time is up.
She arrived at her own anniversary party, carrying nothing but a worn suitcase and a smile, still pretending to be the poor woman his family loved to insult. But before the first toast, his mother dragged her luggage outside and dumped it on the street, calling her an embarrassment. Then her husband stood before every guest and announced he wanted a divorce, right there, under the chandeliers, so he could marry his glamorous mistress, the woman everyone believed was better. He expected tears, he expected begging. Instead, his quiet wife laughed. Because what none of them knew was that she had been hiding the biggest secret in the room. She was the sole heir to a trillion-dollar empire, and she had just signed the documents that could destroy everything they thought they owned. By morning, the mansion was no longer his. The company was no longer safe. His mistress's luxury life began collapsing piece by piece, and his mother, who had thrown her suitcase into the street, found herself standing at the same door she once slammed shut. And when they finally came begging for mercy, she gave them one answer they never saw coming. The laughter did not come loudly. It was not the wild, broken sound Adrian Whitlock had expected from a woman humiliated in front of 300 guests. It was soft, almost private, a single breath wrapped around something colder than amusement. Yet somehow, that laugh found every corner of the ballroom. The violinist stopped playing. The waiter holding the tower of champagne glasses froze so completely that the bubbles in the flute seemed louder than the crowd. Above them, the chandelier scattered gold across the polished marble floor, the same floor Amara had scrubbed with her own hands once when Cornelia Whitlock had decided the housekeeper needed help learning standards. Cornelia stood near the open terrace doors, her thin mouth curved in triumph. Outside, Amara's brown suitcase lay on the steps, its brass latch snapped open, a few folded dresses spilling onto the stone like wounded birds. The wind lifted the corner of one pale blue blouse and dragged it toward the fountain. Adrian's arm remained around Selene Marlowe's waist. Selene glittered beside him, draped in silver silk and diamonds too large to be tasteful. Her smile was careful at first, the way a person smiled when she was being watched by people richer than she was. But as Amara laughed, Selene's smile flickered. Adrian did not like that flicker. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind many times. In every version, Amara's face crumpled. She begged him not to leave. She embarrassed herself. She proved to everyone that she was exactly what his mother had called her from the beginning, low-class, needy, lucky to have been chosen. But Amara stood in the center of the room with a champagne stain on the hem of her simple cream dress, her hair pinned without jewels, her hands empty. She looked neither ruined nor surprised. She looked relieved. "Is something funny?" Adrian asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Amara turned her eyes to him. They were dark, steady, and full of a patience he suddenly disliked. "Yes," she said, "the timing." A whisper passed through the guests. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You have been served with divorce papers. You will leave this house tonight. I have been generous enough to let you keep whatever you brought into this marriage." Cornelia gave a satisfied little clap, which is hardly anything. A few guests laughed nervously, most did not. Amara glanced toward the terrace, where her suitcase rested beneath the stars. "Actually," she said, "I brought more into this marriage than any of you can afford to lose." Selene's hand tightened on Adrian's sleeve. Adrian chuckled, but it came out too forced. "There it is, the dramatic speech. Amara, please, you were a waitress when I met you." "Yes," she said, "I was." "And before that," Cornelia added, "some charity scholarship girl with no family worth mentioning." Amara's eyes moved to Cornelia. For a heartbeat, the room vanished, and she was 6 years younger, standing in the same woman's foyer while rainwater dripped from her coat onto the expensive rug. Cornelia had looked her up and down that day with the same disgust. Adrian had brought her home with flowers in his hand and promises in his mouth. "Mother, this is Amara," he had said then, smiling like a man who had discovered something pure. Cornelia had kissed the air beside Amara's cheek. "How brave," she had said, "to come dressed like that." Amara had smiled because she had promised herself she would. That promise had begun long before Adrian. It had begun in a hospital room where her grandfather, Theodore Vale, lay dying beneath white sheets, his hands still strong around hers. He had built Vale Meridian from shipping routes, mines, data centers, energy grids, medicine patents, and 1,000 quiet investments that sat beneath the world like roots beneath a forest. People called him ruthless. Amara had known him as the man who kept peppermints in his coat pocket and taught her to read balance sheets before bedtime stories. "Money is a mask," he had whispered, his voice ragged but clear. "It makes cruel people charming and weak people loud. Take it off, little star. At least once in your life, take it off and see who still reaches for your hand." After he died, the empire waited for her 25th birthday, locked behind trust laws, old signatures, and one condition written in her grandfather's own hand. She had to live 3 years without using the Vale name, without drawing from the family fortune, without revealing her identity except to the trustees. Theodore had called it a final education. Amara had called it freedom. She became Amara Gray. She rented a tiny apartment above a bakery. She took buses, wore thrift store coats, and worked where no one bowed when she entered. For the first time in her life, people looked at her and saw only what they thought she had. Adrian had found her during the second year of that life. He came into the restaurant during a storm, his suit soaked at the shoulders, his phone dead, his temper hidden under polished manners. Amara remembered how he had helped an elderly man gather spilled coins near the register. She remembered how he had apologized when his order was wrong, even though the cook had made the mistake. She remembered thinking, perhaps foolishly, that her grandfather had been right. Perhaps there were people who reached for hands, not fortunes. He had courted her with coffee instead of champagne, with walks through public gardens instead of private clubs. When he asked about her family, she said they were gone. It was not entirely a lie. Everyone who had loved her without calculation was either dead or paid to protect her secret from a distance. Adrian told her he loved her simplicity. For a while, she believed him. Their marriage began with a small ceremony in a courthouse because Cornelia refused to host a spectacle for a girl with no background. Adrian had been angry then, or at least he had looked angry. He had kissed Amara's hand on the courthouse steps and sworn that one day his mother would respect her. But respect never came. At first, the insults were polished enough to pass as advice. "Darling, never wear cotton to dinner. Speak less at board events. It helps you seem mysterious instead of uneducated. Adrian's world is complicated. Do try not to embarrass him." Then came tasks disguised as tests. Cornelia misplaced jewelry and accused Amara's friends. She changed dinner themes without telling her, then sighed when Amara arrived in the wrong dress. She seated Amara beside men who asked which university she attended, then smiled when Amara gave the name of a tiny scholarship college instead of one that impressed them. Adrian defended her less each month. By the second year, he no longer noticed when Cornelia called her the charity bride. By the third, he laughed when his friends joked that Amara was proof Whitlock men enjoyed rescue projects. The first time Amara saw Selene, she was walking out of Adrian's office with her lipstick freshly applied and her smile too satisfied. Adrian claimed she was a consultant. Cornelia called her a breath of fresh air. Selene called Amara sweetheart in a tone that made the words sound like dust. Amara said nothing. Silence had been one of Theodore Vale's favorite weapons. "People fill silence with the truth," he used to tell her across a chessboard. "Let them talk long enough, and they will hand you the knife they plan to hide." So Amara let them talk. She listened when Adrian came home late and lied badly. She listened when Cornelia praised Selene's family connections. She listened when Selene mentioned investments she could not possibly afford unless someone was paying her bills. She listened when the Whitlock Company began bleeding money under the weight of Adrian's vanity acquisitions. And all the while, through a small law firm with no name on the door, through trustees who still called her Miss Vale when no one else could hear, Amara learned exactly where every debt led. Whitlock Industries was not strong. It was a painted wall over a collapsing foundation. The mansion Cornelia loved was mortgaged twice. The yacht Adrian posed on for magazines belonged to a leasing company whose loans had been purchased by a subsidiary of Vale Meridian. Cellini's boutique skincare brand, Marlowe Radiance, existed because an anonymous private fund had kept it breathing. Adrian's newest project, a luxury waterfront development called the Aurelia, was built on land whose mineral and water rights were held by a trust Amara controlled. Piece by piece, without raising her voice, she had become the ground beneath their feet. That evening, before dressing for the anniversary party, Amara had sat alone in the small room Adrian had once called your little hobby office. It overlooked the rose garden. Cornelia had decorated it in pale yellow because she said the color suited simple women. On the desk lay 2 envelopes. One contained the final trust activation papers. At midnight, on the exact date set by her grandfather's will, every asset of Vale Meridian Consolidated would transfer into Amara's direct control. The other contained the divorce petition Adrian's lawyer had secretly prepared and mistakenly sent to the house printer 2 days earlier. Amara had read it beside the window while roses trembled in the rain. Adrian had asked for the mansion, the country house, the cars, a portion of any marital earnings, though he believed she had none. He claimed irreconcilable differences and emotional incompatibility. He made no mention of Cellini. He made no mention of Cornelia's cruelty. He made no mention of the nights Amara had sat at the dining table while he forgot to come home. At the bottom was a note from his attorney, best delivered publicly if reputation management requires a narrative of mutual separation. Publicly. Amara had signed her own documents after that, each stroke of the pen calm and final. She had not signed because she hated him. That would have been easier. She signed because the last small, stubborn part of her heart had finally stopped waiting for the man from the storm to come back. Now, in the ballroom, Adrian stared at her with a confusion that almost looked like fear. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said. "No," Amara replied. "For the first time in this marriage, I am not." Cornelia stepped forward, diamonds shaking at her throat. "Enough. Leave, before I have security remove you." The word security seemed to wake something in the room. 2 men in black suits shifted near the doors. They had been hired by Cornelia for the event. One of them, a tall man with silver at his temples, looked toward Amara. Not at Adrian, not at Cornelia. At Amara. She gave him the smallest nod. He did not move against her. Cornelia noticed, her mouth tightened. "Did you hear me?" The man answered politely, "Yes, Mrs. Whitlock." "Then escort her out." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Adrian's face changed. "Excuse me." The guard's expression remained neutral. "My instructions are to ensure Mrs. Whitlock's safety and protect her property." Cornelia laughed. "Her property, her suitcase is outside." Amara turned toward the terrace. A young waiter had quietly gathered the spilled clothing and placed it back inside the suitcase. He stood awkwardly beside it, unsure what to do. Amara smiled at him, and his shoulders relaxed. "Thank you," she said. The waiter nodded. That small exchange unsettled Cornelia more than shouting would have. Servants were supposed to fear the Whitlocks. Tonight, they watched Amara as if some invisible crown had appeared above her head. Adrian stepped closer. "Who are you?" There it was. Not "what have I done?" Not "why didn't you tell me?" "Who are you?" Amara felt the last thread snap so softly, no one heard it but her. Before she could answer, the ballroom doors opened. A man entered in a dark suit, carrying a leather folder. Behind him came 2 women, also in formal black, their eyes sharp, their movements unhurried. The guests parted because wealth had an instinct, and power even more so. People who had never met these visitors somehow knew not to block their way. Adrian frowned. This is a private event. The man stopped beside Amara and bowed his head slightly. Miss Vale. The room inhaled. Cornelia blinked. Miss what? Selini's smile vanished. Amara did not look away from Adrian. Vale. Someone dropped a glass. The sound cracked across the marble, and suddenly everyone was whispering at once. Vale, as in Vale Meridian, Theodore Vale's granddaughter. Impossible. No one has seen her in years. She was supposed to be abroad. She was supposed to be dead. She was supposed to be. Paul. Adrian's face drained of color. The man opened the folder. At your request, all preliminary notices have been prepared. We can proceed when you are ready. Proceed with what? Adrian demanded. Amara looked around the ballroom, at the flowers she had chosen because they reminded her of the garden outside her grandfather's library, at the guests who had accepted Cornelia's invitations to witness a humiliation, at Selini, who had worn bridal white beneath a silver wrap as if the night were already hers. Then she looked at her husband. Consequences, she said. For the first time all evening, Cornelia looked uncertain. Adrian, what is she talking about? Adrian did not answer. He was remembering things now. Amara could see it. The old fountain pen she used, when he had mocked for being ugly, engraved with a tiny V beneath the cap. The blue stone ring she wore on a chain under her blouse, not because it was cheap, but because it belonged to her grandmother, Isabella Vale. The nights she asked him about his company's debt structure, and he laughed, telling her not to worry her pretty little head. The way certain bankers returned her calls faster than his. The way she had once warned him not to trust a land deal near the Aurelia site, because ownership is more complicated than it looks. He had thought she was repeating gossip. She had been offering him a lifeline. You lied to me, he said. Amara's smile faded. Yes. He seemed encouraged by the admission. You trapped me. No, I gave you 3 years to decide who you were when you thought I had nothing to offer. The words landed with a quiet weight. Adrian flinched, then hardened. Pride rushed in where shame should have been. You think money changes this? I still want a divorce. You may have one. Selini recovered enough to tilt her chin. Then why this performance? Sign the papers and go. Amara turned to her. Selini, your company received $28 million from North Star Lily Capital over the past 14 months. Selini froze. Adrian looked at her. What? Selini's mouth opened, but no sound came. North Star Lily, Amara continued, is owned by a Vale Meridian investment vehicle. The funding agreement includes a morality clause, a fraud clause, and a disclosure clause regarding relationships with officers of partner companies. Selini's face became waxen. Cornelia whispered, What does that mean? It means, said the man beside Amara, Ms. Marlowe may be required to repay the full investment immediately, with penalties pending investigation. That's impossible, Selini snapped. My lawyers reviewed. Your lawyers reviewed the summary, Amara said, not the controlling documents. Adrian should have taught you to read the fine print. He is very fond of hiding things there. A few guests murmured. Someone near the back laughed once, then covered it with a cough. Adrian pointed at the man. Get out, all of you. I wouldn't, Amara said softly. His hand dropped. Whitlock Industries, she continued, has defaulted on 3 loan covenants this quarter. 2 were temporarily waived by a creditor who has now decided not to extend further grace. Adrian's eyes darted. That creditor is Harborline. Harborline is owned by Grey Harbor Trust. Cornelia looked from Adrian to Amara. And what is Grey Harbor Trust? Amara picked an invisible thread from her sleeve. Me. The room went so silent that the fountain outside could be heard splashing against stone. Adrian swallowed. You wouldn't. He said it like a husband, not a businessman, like betrayal was something only he was allowed to commit. Amara remembered a night 8 months earlier when she had found him in the library, tie loosened, head in his hands. The company was in trouble then. He had not known she knew. For a moment, she had almost told him everything. She had imagined sitting beside him, laying the truth between them gently, saying, "I can help. I have always been able to help." Then his phone lit up. Selini's name appeared with a message preview. "Tell your charity wife you're working late again. I miss you." Adrian had smiled at the screen. Amara had walked away without a sound. Now she said, "I would have saved you if you had ever once asked me as your wife, instead of using me as your excuse." He stared at her. The sentence found him somewhere deep, but not deep enough to change him. His shame twisted into anger. This is blackmail. No, this is business. Cornelia's voice sharpened. "You ungrateful little." "Careful," Amara said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Cornelia stopped anyway. All her life, Cornelia Whitlock had mistaken volume for authority. She had married into old money, guarded it badly, and built herself a throne out of manners, fear, and other people's silence. Amara had studied her the way she studied failing companies. Cornelia's cruelty was not random. It was investment. She spent humiliation carefully, expecting obedience as return. But tonight, for the first time, the market had turned. Amara nodded to the man with the folder. "Mr. Ellis, please continue." Nathaniel Ellis, chief counsel for Vale Meridian and one of the few people who had known Amara's identity all along, removed a document. "Mrs. Cornelia Whitlock, this property is under lien through a series of refinanced obligations now held by Gray Harbor Trust. Notice of acceleration has been filed due to documented misrepresentation of collateral value." Cornelia gripped the back of a chair. "This is my house." "No," Amara said. "It is a house you borrowed against to maintain a life you could not afford." Adrian turned on his mother. "You said the refinancing was handled." Cornelia's eyes flashed. "It was, your father always." "My father is dead." The words struck harder than he intended. For one strange second, Amara saw the child in Adrian, the boy who had lost his father at 14 and watched his mother turn grief into an empire of control. She had heard the story many times. Cornelia's husband had been gentle, careless with money, generous with people below his station. After he died, Cornelia erased every trace of softness from the family. She raised Adrian to believe tenderness was a bill that always came due. Amara had once pitied him for that. Then he chose to become her. Nathaniel continued. "Formal occupancy review begins tomorrow morning at 9. Until then, no one is to remove assets from the premises without authorization." Selini whispered, "Assets." Amara looked at the diamonds around her neck, especially borrowed ones. Selini touched the necklace. Adrian noticed, "Borrowed." Selini dropped her hand. "Adrian, this is ridiculous." But the room had already begun to turn against her. Wealthy people were forgiving of affairs, vanity, even cruelty. They were less forgiving of fake diamonds, unpaid loans, and legal exposure. Amara stepped away from the center of the ballroom and walked toward the terrace. No one blocked her. The crowd parted, as if remembering that it had always belonged to her to decide where she stood. At the doorway, she paused beside Cornelia. The older woman's perfume smelled of roses and smoke. "You think you've won," Cornelia whispered. Amara looked at the suitcase on the steps. "No, I think I've learned." Outside, the air was cool. Her suitcase waited beneath the terrace lights. The young waiter had closed it and set it upright. Amara touched the handle. For 3 years, everything she had allowed herself to own fit inside it. 2 dresses, a sweater with a repaired sleeve, a pair of shoes she loved because they were comfortable, not expensive, a framed photograph of her grandfather sitting on a dock with his trousers rolled up, laughing at something outside the frame. Letters from her old life, letters from herself, written on nights when she was afraid she had made a mistake. At the bottom of the suitcase was a small velvet pouch. Inside it rested the Vale signet. She had not worn it since the day her grandfather died. She removed it now and slid it onto her finger. The ring was heavy, not with gold but with memory. When she returned to the ballroom, the effect was immediate. Some guests recognized it, others recognized their recognition. The whispers changed from suspicion to certainty. Adrian stared at her hand. "How could you hide this from me?" he asked. Amara almost laughed again, but this time there was no humor left. "You hid a mistress in our marriage, you hid debts in your company, you hid contempt behind manners, but you are offended because I hid my name." His mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. Nathaniel handed her a document. "There is one more matter." Amara did not take it yet. She already knew what it was. The investigation report had arrived that afternoon. She had read it twice, once as a wife, once as the head of a company. The first reading hurt, the second clarified. Adrian had not merely cheated. He had used marital accounts to fund Selini's travel. He had redirected payments from Whitlock Industries to shell consultants tied to her brand. Cornelia had signed statements inflating the value of family assets. Selini had presented herself to investors as Adrian's future spouse before the divorce was even filed, implying access to Whitlock contracts she did not have. Messy, arrogant, traceable. Exactly the kind of wrongdoing people committed when they believed the quiet woman in the room was too small to notice. Amara took the document. "Adrian, I am going to give you something you never gave me." He looked wary. "A private chance to do the decent thing." Cornelia snapped, "There will be no private." Amara did not look at her. "You will sign a clean divorce. No claim to assets you did not build. No public lies. No attempt to paint me as unstable, unfaithful, or greedy. You will cooperate with the debt restructuring of Whitlock Industries under external supervision. You will return what you misused." Selini's voice shook. "And me?" Amara faced her. "You will step down from Marlowe Radiant's pending review. If investigators find no fraud, you may keep what is legally yours. If they do find fraud, you will face the consequences." Selini's eyes shone with sudden tears. "You can't ruin me over love." "Love," Amara repeated. The word tasted strange in that room. She remembered Adrian bringing her soup when she had a fever during their first winter together. She remembered him falling asleep on the floor beside her because her apartment had no couch. She remembered how he once kissed flour from her cheek while they tried to bake bread and ruined it so badly they ate toast for dinner instead. Those memories had kept her loyal long after loyalty became loneliness. "Love does not require invoices," Amara said. Selini looked away. Adrian's voice dropped. "And if I refuse?" The old Adrian would have asked because he wanted to understand. This Adrian asked because he wanted to calculate. Amara gave him the truth. Then everything becomes public, every document, every transfer, every lie. "Not tonight, not because I need applause, but because the people you owe deserve the truth." A woman near the front, Mrs. Bellwether, whose family had invested in Whitlock Industries for generations, turned sharply toward Adrian. "What transfers?" Adrian paled. "This is not the time." "No," Mrs. Bellwether said coldly. "It appears this is exactly the time." The party began dissolving after that. Not with drama, but with calculation. Guests slipped away in clusters, dialing phones, whispering to assistants, asking drivers to bring cars around. The orchestra packed up without being told. The champagne tower remained untouched, a glittering monument to a celebration that had become evidence. Cornelia tried to command people to stay. Few listened. Selini argued with someone on her phone in the corner, her voice rising and falling in panic. Adrian stood near the fireplace, staring at nothing, one hand gripping the divorce papers he had planned to use like a weapon. Now they hung from his fingers like a confession. At midnight, the great clock in the hall began to chime. 1, 2, 3. Amara stood beneath the chandelier and felt each note pass through her. 4, 5. 6. Somewhere across the ocean, systems were updating, trustees were confirming, locks were opening on accounts that had slept for years. Her grandfather's empire, built over half a century, was becoming hers not in theory, not through guardians, but fully. 7. 8. 9. She thought she would feel triumph. 10. 11. Instead, she felt grief. 12. Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, then looked at her with a softness few people ever saw in him. "It's done," he said. Amara nodded. Across the room, Adrian seemed to understand that the sound of the clock had marked more than midnight. It had marked the end of the world as he knew it. He took one step toward her, Amara. She had waited 3 years to hear him say her name like that again. Not sharply, not carelessly, not as an inconvenience, like it mattered. And now that he had, it was too late. "I'm tired," she said. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out of the house. No one stopped her. The first cameras appeared at the gates before dawn. By 6 in the morning, financial reporters were speaking breathlessly about a major creditor action involving Whitlock Industries. By 7, blogs had linked Selene Marlowe to undisclosed funding. By 8, society pages were already rewriting the anniversary party into legend, each version more dramatic than the last. Amara did not watch any of it. She slept for 4 hours in the penthouse suite of the Old Vale Hotel, a building her grandfather had bought not because it was profitable, but because her grandmother loved the view from the roof. When she woke, sunlight filled the room. Her suitcase sat near the door, looking small against the quiet luxury around it. For a moment, she did not know who she was supposed to be. Then her phone buzzed. 27 missed calls from Adrian. 14 from Cornelia. 9 from numbers she did not recognize. One message from Nathaniel: board convenes at 10, press holding, security in place, breakfast outside your door, eat. Amara smiled faintly. Nathaniel had worked for her grandfather for 30 years. He treated empires like weather and breakfast like law. She showered, dressed in a navy suit that had been waiting in the closet, and opened the velvet box delivered with it. Inside lay a simple pair of pearl earrings and a handwritten note from her late grandfather. "For when the mask comes off." She sat on the edge of the bed. The memory rose before she could stop it. Theodore Vale standing in the old greenhouse, showing her how a certain white flower only opened at night. "Some things bloom in darkness," he had said. Young Amara had touched the closed petals, but no one sees them. That does not make the blooming less real. She put on the earrings. At 10, she entered the Vale Meridian boardroom for the first time as its undisputed owner. The directors stood. Not all of them loved her. Some feared her. A few had hoped she would fail the 3-year condition and leave the empire under professional control. But every one of them understood what her grandfather had done. He had sent his heir into the world without armor, and she had returned knowing exactly how armor was made. Nathaniel opened the meeting. Numbers moved across screens. Legal updates followed. Whitlock Industries was discussed not as family drama, but as exposure. The company employed 12,000 people. Factories, logistics contracts, pensions, suppliers, all tied to decisions Adrian had made with more ego than discipline. Amara listened. When the restructuring proposal appeared, one director cleared his throat. "We can force liquidation. It would recover the debt faster." "And cost how many jobs?" Amara asked. Silence. "Approximately 7,000 in the first phase," another director admitted. Amara looked at the figures. Adrian deserved collapse. His employees did not. "We restructure," she said. "Remove Adrian as acting CEO pending investigation. Install oversight. Protect wages and pensions first. Freeze executive bonuses. Review all related party transactions." A director raised an eyebrow. "That is merciful." No, Amara said, it is disciplined. Still, the word mercy followed her out of the boardroom like a shadow. By afternoon, the mansion gates had been locked under supervision. Cornelia refused to leave the premises, then discovered refusal was less effective when no one was afraid of her. She called Amara 31 more times. Amara answered on the 32nd. Cornelia did not begin with apology. This has gone far enough, she said. Amara stood by the penthouse window, looking down at the city. Good afternoon to you too. You will call off these people at my house. Your house is under legal review. It is my home. Amara closed her eyes. She thought of her suitcase on the street. Homes are easier to recognize when you do not throw people out of them. Cornelia's breath hissed through the line. I did what any mother would do. I protected my son. No, Amara said. You trained him to confuse cruelty with strength. The silence that followed was different from the others. For once, Cornelia did not have a ready insult. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. You have no idea what it takes to keep a family from falling. Amara almost hung up. But something in Cornelia's voice held her there. Not regret, not yet, fear perhaps, and beneath fear, exhaustion. I know more than you think, Amara said. Cornelia gave a brittle laugh. Because you played poor for a few years. Because I lost my parents at 12 and was raised inside a boardroom by people who smiled at me while calculating my worth. Because my grandfather loved me enough to make sure money could not be the only language I understood. Because I entered your family hopping to be loved without a price tag, and you spent 3 years proving you only respected one. Another silence. This time, Cornelia ended the call. Amara lowered the phone slowly. She had not expected the conversation to hurt, but pain was not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it was proof that something rotten was finally being cleaned. That evening, Adrian came to the hotel. Security called first. Mr. Whitlock is in the lobby. He says he is your husband. Amara looked at the divorce petition on the table. For now. Shall we send him away? She considered it. Then she remembered Theodore's voice. Never fear a conversation. Fear only the price of avoiding one. Send him to the private lounge, she said. Adrian looked older than he had the night before, not by years exactly, but by illusions. His suit was wrinkled. His hair, usually perfect, had been pushed back too many times. He stood when she entered. For a second, neither spoke. The private lounge was quiet, all dark wood and rain tapping against tall windows. It reminded Amara of the night they met, the same weather, a different man, or perhaps the same man with better lighting. Did you ever love me? Adrian asked. It was not the question she expected. She sat across from him. Yes. He flinched. Did you love me? She asked. His eyes reddened, but he did not cry. Adrian Whitlock had been taught that tears were a loss of status. I thought I did. Honest, at least. Amara nodded. Then let's not insult what little truth is left by pretending otherwise. He looked down. Selene is gone. Amara said nothing. She left when her accounts froze. She said she needed space to protect her brand. He laughed once bitterly. Her brand. Outside, the rain thickened. My mother says you planned this from the beginning, he said. Your mother says many things. Did you? Amara leaned back. No, in the beginning, I planned to tell you everything. He looked up. She continued, on our first anniversary, I booked a cabin by the lake. I was going to tell you there. I had the documents with me. Adrian's face shifted. He remembered. Of course he did. He had cancelled that trip 2 hours before they were supposed to leave because Cornelia insisted he attend a donor dinner with a shipping heiress. He had said it was important for business. Amara had spent that night alone in their bedroom, her suitcase half-packed, the veiled documents spread across the bed like a future that had closed its door. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't ask. He rubbed his hands over his face. I was under pressure. So was I. My mother is responsible for herself, and so are you. He dropped his hands. For the first time, he looked angry at himself instead of at her. The expression did not redeem him, but it made him human. What happens now? He asked. You sign the divorce agreement, you cooperate with the investigation, you tell the truth. And after that? Amara studied him. Once she would have given anything to be asked that question. After that, we heal. After that, we rebuild. After that, we become the people we promised to be. But the future had changed shape. After that, she said, you learn who you are without my silence protecting you. Adrian stared at the table. Can you forgive me? The rain filled the pause. I don't know, Amara answered, but forgiveness would not give you back access to me. He nodded, as if the words had struck exactly where they needed to. When he left, he did not try to touch her. That was the first decent thing he had done in months. The next week unfolded like a storm that had been gathering for years. Whitlock Industries board removed Adrian pending review. The announcement was careful, professional, and devastating. Investors panicked, then steadied when Vale Meridian offered conditional support. Workers arrived at factories afraid of losing their jobs and found notices guaranteeing payroll through restructuring. Suppliers received calls assuring them contracts would be honored if pricing was legitimate. Amara spent 14-hour days in meetings, not because she needed to punish Adrian, but because she refused to let his failure become everyone else's disaster. Reporters camped outside the Vale Hotel. Commentators argued about her. Some called her brilliant, others called her deceptive. A few asked whether a woman who hid her identity from her husband could be trusted with $1 trillion empire. Amara did not answer them. Her work answered. Within 10 days, 3 shell companies tied to Cellini were under review. 2 executives resigned. Cornelia's personal accounts were frozen pending asset verification. The mansion staff, whom Cornelia had underpaid while demanding loyalty, were offered proper contracts under the property administrator. On the 11th day, Amara returned to the mansion. Not as a wife, not as a guest, as the person with the keys. The house looked different in daylight, smaller somehow. Its grand staircase curved upward with all the elegance money could buy, but the corners held dust. The flowers from the anniversary party were gone. The ballroom had been cleaned, though one faint mark remained near the terrace doors where champagne had spilled. Amara stood there for a long moment. She remembered dancing with Adrian in that room during their first month of marriage. There had been no party then, just music from his phone and rain against the windows. He had spun her clumsily, laughing when she stepped on his foot. You'll get used to this place, he had said. She had believed she needed to. A soft voice interrupted, Mrs. Whitlock. It was Lena, one of the housemaids. She was 22, with tired eyes and careful hands. Cornelia had once made her redo an entire dining table because the forks were too hopeful in their angle. Amara, she said gently, please. Lena smiled nervously. Your suitcase is upstairs. We put it in the blue room after that night. Thank you. Lena hesitated. I'm sorry no one helped sooner. Amara looked at her. You helped when it was safe to help. Sometimes that is all people can do. Tears filled Lena's eyes, but she blinked them away. The staff wanted you to know, Mrs. Amara, we knew you were kind, even when they acted like you were. Kind. The word nearly undid her. Power was easier to receive than kindness. Power asked nothing but performance. Kindness asked you to admit you had needed it. Thank you, Amara said. Upstairs, the blue room smelled faintly of lavender. Her suitcase sat on a bench at the foot of the bed. Beside it was a garment bag containing the dresses Cornelia had chosen for her over the years, too plain for important events, too childish for dinners, always designed to make her seem slightly wrong. Amara opened the suitcase and removed the photograph of her grandfather. For a while, she simply held it. Then, downstairs, voices rose. She found Cornelia in the front hall arguing with the property administrator. The older woman wore a grey coat and no jewelry. Without diamonds, she looked less like a queen and more like someone who had spent years confusing decoration with dignity. When she saw Amara, her face tightened. "You." "Cornelia." The administrator looked relieved. "Ms. Vale, Mrs. Whitlock is requesting access to several items currently under review." "They are family pieces," Cornelia snapped. Amara glanced at the inventory list. Some were purchased with funds tied to misrepresented collateral. Cornelia's nostrils flared. "You enjoy this?" "No. You expect me to believe that. I don't expect anything from you anymore." That landed. For years, Amara had expected decency, apology, change. Cornelia had lived under the luxury of those expectations, mistaking them for weakness. Now they were gone, and the absence seemed to frighten her more than anger would have. Cornelia's shoulders lowered a fraction. "Where am I supposed to go?" The administrator looked away. Amara studied the woman who had thrown her luggage into the street. The easy answer rose quickly, "Anywhere but here." The satisfying answer followed, "Perhaps the street has room." But satisfaction was not justice. It was only hunger wearing a crown. "There is a guest cottage on the north property," Amara said. "It is modest, but comfortable. You may stay there for 30 days while your personal assets are reviewed." Cornelia blinked. "A cottage?" "Yes. I am Cornelia Whitlock. I know. My friends have largely stopped taking your calls." Cornelia recoiled as if slapped. Amara did not apologize. Truth was not cruelty just because it hurt. "You will have privacy," Amara said. "You will not contact the staff except through the administrator. You will not remove items from the house. You will not speak to reporters about me, Adrian, or the investigation." Cornelia's lips trembled with rage or humiliation, perhaps both. "And if I refuse?" "Then you can arrange other accommodations without my assistance." The older woman looked around the hall, at portraits of Whitlock ancestors who had probably never imagined their descendant negotiating shelter with the woman they had mocked. Her eyes glistened, but pride held the tears in place. Finally, she whispered, 30 days. 30 days. Cornelia gave a stiff nod and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. For one moment, Amara thought she might apologize. Instead, Cornelia said, "He was different before his father died." Amara said nothing. Cornelia's voice thinned. "I didn't know how to raise a gentle boy alone." Then she left. It was not an apology, but it was the first true thing Cornelia had ever given her. Selene came 3 days later. She did not arrive in silver silk. She arrived in oversized sunglasses, a beige coat, and desperation so strong it entered the room before she did. Nathaniel advised against seeing her. "She wants leverage," he said. "Probably," Amara replied. "People like Ms. Marlowe do not ask for mercy until strategy fails." Amara signed the document in front of her. "Then, let's hear the strategy." Selene was shown into a conference room overlooking the river. She removed her sunglasses, but not her pride. "You have made your point," she said. Amara looked at her calmly. "Have I? My investors are pulling out. My accounts are frozen. My landlord wants guarantees. I have employees who don't deserve this." That was the first useful sentence Selene had spoken. "How many?" Amara asked. Selene faltered. "Employees." "Yes, 42. Full-time. 30, 12 contractors. Payroll current." Selene looked away. Amara's expression cooled. "Selene." "No," she admitted, "not next week." Amara opened the folder Nathaniel had placed before her. "You spent company funds on personal travel, jewelry, and private club memberships. I was building an image. You were building a costume. Selini's cheeks flushed. Easy for you to say, you were born with everything. There it was, the familiar accusation. Amara leaned forward. Yes, I was born with more money than most people can imagine. I was also born into rooms where everyone wanted something from me before I understood what wanting meant. Privilege is real, so is choice. Do not use one to excuse the other. Selini looked down. For a moment, the mask cracked. Beneath it was not a monster, just a frightened woman who had spent too long believing admiration could keep her warm. My mother cleaned hotel rooms, Selini said quietly. Men like Adrian never looked at girls like me unless we became something shiny first. Amara felt no satisfaction in the confession, only a tired sadness. My mother died when I was young, Selini continued. She used to say beauty was rent you paid in advance. I hated her for that. Then I became exactly what she warned me about. The river moved beyond the glass, grey under the afternoon sky. Did you love him? Amara asked. Selini laughed weakly. I loved what he could open. Honest enough. And now all the doors are closing. Amara studied her for a long moment. Then she said, your employees will be paid. Selini's head lifted. What? Vale Meridian will place Marlow Radiance into managed review. Payroll will be covered for 90 days. Legitimate business operations may continue under supervision. Selini's relief was so sudden it looked painful. Thank you. I'm not finished. The relief froze. You will resign from executive control. You will cooperate with investigators. You will return personal expenses charged to company accounts. You will issue a statement taking responsibility without mentioning me. Selini swallowed. And if I do all that? You may avoid charges from our side. I cannot speak for other parties. Selini gripped the edge of the table. You're letting me keep part of it. I am protecting the people you used as decoration in your ambition. The words strung. Selini accepted them because she had no choice, but also perhaps because she knew they were true. At the door, Selini turned back. Why aren't you crueler? Amara thought of her suitcase, her ring, her grandfather's night-blooming flowers, the younger version of herself waiting for love to prove itself. Because I know what it feels like to become what hurt you, she said, I refuse. Selini left without another word. The divorce became final 6 weeks later. There was no courtroom spectacle, no dramatic confrontation, just signatures, legal language, and the strange quiet that follows the end of something once believed permanent. Adrian signed everything. He also testified before the restructuring committee, admitting to misuse of funds and executive misconduct. His lawyers framed it as cooperation. The tabloids framed it as downfall. Amara understood it as the first brick in a road he would have to build himself. Cornelia moved from the cottage to a smaller townhouse purchased with what remained legally hers. She did not thank Amara directly, but one morning a package arrived at the Vale office. Inside was the pale blue blouse the wind had dragged across the terrace steps, cleaned, pressed, and folded. There was no note. Amara placed it in her suitcase. She kept the suitcase in her office after that, not hidden, not displayed like a trophy, simply there, near the window, a reminder of what fit inside a life when everything unnecessary was taken away. Months passed. Vale Meridian changed under her leadership, quietly at first, then unmistakably. She launched worker protection clauses in all major restructurings. She created a fund for employees harmed by executive fraud. She ordered audits of every luxury brand under Vale's investment umbrella and fired 3 directors who thought ethics were decorative. Reporters still wanted the romantic scandal. Amara gave them governance reform. They wanted tears. She gave them policy. They wanted revenge. She gave them results. And yet, late at night, when the office emptied and the city turned into a field of lights below her, grief still came. She missed who she had thought Adrian was. Not the man who humiliated her, not the man who chose Selene beneath chandeliers, but the man in the rain who helped gather an old stranger's coins, the man who laughed over burnt bread, the man who might have existed if he had been braver than his upbringing. Missing him did not mean wanting him back. That was a lesson Amara learned slowly. One evening, nearly a year after the anniversary party, she received a letter handwritten on plain cream paper. Amara, I have started over. Not publicly, not impressively, there is no headline in it. I am working with the restructuring team in a limited role, not as an executive. Mostly I listen to people I used to ignore. I sold the cars, I moved into an apartment I can afford, my mother is speaking to a therapist, I am too. I do not deserve your forgiveness, and I will not ask again, but I want to say what I should have said that night. You were my wife, I failed you, not because I did not know your name, but because I forgot your worth before I ever learned it. I am sorry. Adrian. Amara read it twice. Then she folded it and placed it in a drawer. She did not cry. She did not reply. Some apologies are real and still arrive after the door has closed. Winter softened into spring. On the first warm day of April, Amara visited her grandfather's old estate for the first time since taking full control of the company. She had avoided it for months, afraid the memories would be too large. The greenhouse still stood beyond the main house. Inside, the night-blooming flowers slept in their pots, pale petals closed against the afternoon sun. The gardener, an elderly woman named Mee, hugged Amara without asking permission. Your grandfather would be unbearable with pride, Mee said. Amara laughed. He was unbearable without it. Mee smiled, that too. They walked among the plants. At the far end of the greenhouse, beneath a pane of glass repaired after a storm years ago, stood the white flowers Theodore had shown her as a child. They still bloom, Amara asked. Every night. Amara touched a closed bud. For so long she had thought her hidden years were a test of other people. Adrian's loyalty, Cornelia's decency, Selene's honesty, society's kindness. But perhaps her grandfather had meant something else too. Perhaps he had wanted Amara to meet herself without the empire, to discover whether she could be insulted and remain whole, whether she could be betrayed and remain fair, whether she could inherit power without letting pain decide how she used it. At dusk, the first flower opened. Amara watched the petals unfold slowly, without apology, as if darkness had never been an enemy, only the condition required for blooming. Her phone buzzed. Nathaniel. Sorry to disturb you, he said. The Whitlock restructuring report is finalized. And stable, reduced, but stable. Jobs preserved better than expected. Amara exhaled. Good. There is another matter. Mrs. Whitlock and Ms. Marlowe have both requested a meeting. Amara looked at the flower. Together, Cornelia and Selene would have once made an army of everything that had hurt her. Pride, beauty, class, cruelty, hunger. Now they were just two women standing in the wreckage of their own choices, asking for an audience. What do they want? She asked. Nathaniel paused. Mercy, I believe. A year ago, the word might have burned. Now it's simply settled. Schedule it, Amara said. The meeting took place 3 days later in a small room at the Vale Foundation building, not the corporate tower. Amara chose it deliberately. The foundation handled scholarships, housing initiatives, worker relief, and recovery grants. It was a place built for second chances, but never cheap ones. Cornelia arrived first. She wore a simple black dress and carried no handbag worth noticing. Her hair was still perfect, but there was less armor in her posture. Selene came next, dressed professionally, her makeup lighter, her expression guarded. They did not sit near each other. Amara entered with no entourage. Nathaniel remained outside. For a moment, the three women simply looked at one another. There had been a time when Cornelia could make Amara feel small by lifting one eyebrow. There had been a time when Selene could make her feel replaceable by entering a room. That power was gone now. Not because Amara was richer, because she had stopped applying for approval from people bankrupt in everything that mattered. Cornelia spoke first. "I was cruel to you." Amara sat across from her. "Yes." Cornelia's mouth tightened, but she continued. "I told myself I was protecting my family. I was protecting my pride. There is a difference, though I pretended not to know it." Selene looked surprised. Perhaps she had expected Cornelia to bargain, not confess. Cornelia folded her hands. "Adrian has changed, some, not enough, but some, I am trying to as well." Amara waited. The older woman's voice lowered. "I threw your luggage into the street because I wanted everyone to see you had nothing. I understand now that I was the one showing them what I lacked." The room held the words carefully. Selene looked down at her lap. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "I came to ask for help, not for me, or not only for me." Amara turned to her. "Marlowe Radiance is gone," Selene said. "The review found enough misconduct that I couldn't keep it. I accept that. But some of the formulas, the actual products, were developed by a lab team that did nothing wrong. They're trying to start a cooperative. They need seed funding. No one will touch anything connected to my name." "And why bring this to me?" "Because you said you were protecting the people I used as decoration." Selene swallowed. "You were right. I don't want to use them again." Amara leaned back. Cornelia glanced at Selene, then away. Their alliance, if it had ever been one, had not survived reality, but perhaps something else had formed in its place. Not friendship, not trust. Maybe only the humility of two people who had discovered the flaw beneath them could disappear. "And you, Cornelia?" Amara asked. "What mercy are you asking for?" Cornelia looked directly at her. That alone was new. In the past, she had looked down, through, or past Amara. "Never directly. I want to work with the Foundation," she said. Amara did not hide her surprise. Cornelia's cheeks colored. "I know how that sounds." "Do you?" "Yes," a trace of the old sharpness appeared, then faded. "I spent years teaching young women how to enter rooms like weapons, how to marry well, dress correctly, speak without revealing need. I thought I was helping them survive. Perhaps I was only teaching them to become lonely in expensive rooms." Amara said nothing. "There are girls on your scholarship lists," Cornelia continued. "Girls entering universities, internships, families, industries where people will judge them before they speak. I could teach them the rules." Amara's expression cooled. Cornelia lifted a hand. "Not the way I taught you, not to make them smaller, to help them see the game without surrendering themselves to it." It was a good proposal. That annoyed Amara more than it should have. Selene added softly, "She helped me prepare for a supplier meeting last month. I hated every second, but she was useful." Cornelia gave her a look. "You wore feathers to a finance meeting." "They were tasteful feathers. They were a cry for help." Despite herself, Amara smiled. The moment was small, strange, and almost impossible a year earlier. Then Cornelia looked back at her. "I am not asking you to forget." "Good," Amara said, "because I won't. I am asking whether the worst thing I did has to be the only thing left of me." The question moved through Amara with unexpected force. Hadn't she wondered the same of Adrian, of herself, of anyone who had failed and survived long enough to see the failure clearly? Mercy, her grandfather once said, is not the cancellation of debt. It is the refusal to charge interest forever. Amara looked at Selene. "The lab team may apply through the Worker Enterprise Fund. Their proposal will be reviewed on merit. Your name will neither help nor hurt them unless you attempt to influence the process." Selene nodded quickly. "I understand." Amara turned to Cornelia. "You may volunteer for 6 months under supervision. You will not lead workshops. You will assist. You will listen more than you speak." Cornelia opened her mouth, then closed it. That will be difficult. I know. A faint smile touched Cornelia's lips. Fair. Amara stood, signaling the meeting was over. Selene rose too. Thank you. Cornelia remained seated for a second longer. Amara. She looked back. I am sorry, Cornelia said. No performance, no diamonds, no audience, just the words late and imperfect. Amara felt the old wound answer, not by closing, but by releasing its demand to be seen by the person who made it. I believe you, she said. Cornelia's eyes filled. I also need you to understand something, Amara continued. Mercy is not a door back into my life. It is a path forward with boundaries. Do not confuse the two. Cornelia nodded. I won't. And Amara believed that too. Not fully, not foolishly, but enough. 2 years after the anniversary party, Vale Foundation opened the Night Garden Center in the city's poorest district. It offered legal aid, financial education, emergency housing support, and scholarships for young people agging out of foster care. Amara named it for the flowers that bloomed in darkness. At the opening, reporters expected a speech about resilience. Amara gave them a story instead. She spoke of a girl who had inherited everything except certainty, a girl who hid her name to find the truth, a girl who mistook endurance for love and silence for grace, a girl who learned that power was not proven by how completely you could destroy those who hurt you, but by how carefully you could choose what deserved saving. She did not mention Adrian. She did not mention Selene. She did not mention Cornelia throwing her suitcase into the street. But near the back of the crowd, Cornelia stood beside a group of scholarship students, correcting one girl's posture with surprising gentleness. Selene sat with the former lab team, now founders of a modest cooperative that had just won its first ethical manufacturing grant. Nathaniel stood near the exit, pretending not to look proud. And on the front row, in an empty chair reserved for no living guest, sat Amara's old suitcase. People asked about it afterward. She smiled and said, "That is where I keep my first empire." They thought she meant the secret of her disguise, the drama, the legend. They were wrong. Inside the suitcase were not contracts or jewels. There was the blue blouse, the photograph of Theodore Vale, the courthouse receipt from her marriage, the unsigned copy of the first letter she had once written to Adrian telling him the truth, and a pressed white flower from the greenhouse. Things that reminded her who she had been. Things that reminded her what she had survived. Things that reminded her never to measure a person by what fit inside their luggage. That evening, after the ceremony ended and the center lights glowed warm against the darkening street, Amara stepped outside alone. The city moved around her, impatient and alive. Somewhere, people were losing fortunes. Somewhere, people were finding courage. Somewhere, a girl with no famous name was walking into a room where others would underestimate her. Amara hoped she would laugh when they did. A car pulled up by the curb. Nathaniel opened the rear door, but Amara did not get in right away. She looked up. Above the city, the first stars were appearing. For most of her life, people had told her inheritance was about receiving what others built. But standing there, no longer hidden, no longer begging to be chosen, Amara understood the truth. Inheritance was not the empire. It was the responsibility to become someone worthy of holding it. She slid the veil ring from her finger and held it in her palm. The gold was warm from her skin. Once, it had felt heavy with expectation. Now it felt steady. Behind her, laughter rose from inside the Night Garden Center. Young, bright, unafraid. Amara smiled. Then she put the ring back on, picked up her suitcase, and stepped into the future on her own terms.